Today we're talking about young adulthood. This is where most of you probably are. If you're not an emerging adult, you're a young adult, probably, hopefully. I'll tell you when we get to me. So I'm assuming that almost all of you are young adults. So let's go ahead and get started. Fun chapter. We get to talk about adults and all the things you should be doing and some of the things you're not doing. I'm not exactly sure why I have all the rain, but it sure is a pretty picture. What it means to become an adult, accepting responsibility for oneself, of course, making independent decisions, becoming financially independent. Cultural variations include, well, Israelis must complete 2 years of military service. Now, once upon a time in the United States, and I was alive during this time, everyone in the United States, all males in the United States had to serve 2 years in the service as well. A long time ago, actually, it was before the Vietnam War. So just about everybody had to serve 2 years. There was a way to get out of it. I can't remember how they were doing it. I guess there was an educational deferment. Of course, there was a physical deferment. But what happened was it was a 6 year commitment, and you would be in the service for 2 years, and then you were on inactive reserve for 4 years. Um, and this was between the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Koreans and Chinese shift from being supported by their parents to supporting their parents financially. In traditional cultures, focuses on marriage. In India, the top criteria for adulthood has to do with emotional self-control. Something I just learned last weekend was that China right now is the most populous country in the world. They have more people than anybody else. However, India will pass them within the next year. That's one of the messages. One of the reasons is because the Chinese have worried about overpopulation of their country for a long time, and when they just had free and open reproduction, this was a really severe problem. But then they started limiting people who lived in urban areas to one child, and that's one of the reasons why their population was steady there for a while, and now it's declining. And people have decided, since they have become more of a capitalist country, that they would rather have nice things than have 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 kids or whatever. So it looks like India is about to surpass the population of China. Changes in aging, graying hair begins in young adults at about the 30 years of age point. I have to tell you this story. I was working at the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana, and one of my friends, native fellow, was exactly the same age. He was like 2 months younger than I was, and of course I've got gray hair all to hell. And he didn't have the first gray hair in his head. I worked. How old was I? I worked there from 2001 until 2010, 2011. Anyway, so I was 50 to 60. I worked at Fort Belknap, and I'm 73 now, so you can figure that one out if you like. Yeah, I'm 73. Thinning hair, I've got a bald spot on top of my head. I can't see it, so I don't care. Let other people worry about it. Skin becomes looser and wrinkles appear. There's a reason why you can't see me on these videos, and it's because my skin's all wrinkly and I've got these jowly things coming down. It's a family thing. Cholesterol and fat begin to accumulate as metabolism decreases with age. This is something that you have to remember. I've tried to maintain my metabolism by running and walking and lifting weights, but it's still declined to some extent. Your immune system ages, reduction of T cells and B cells, making the individual more susceptible to disease. This is a problem I haven't had. for a couple different reasons, and we don't really need to go into those reasons. Why do I have such a strong immune system? I don't have a spleen. My spleen was taken out. I lost my spleen in 1985 in a soccer game, and that sounds like it just came out during the soccer game. I got hit during the soccer game. It ruptured my spleen, and I had to have it operated on, and they took the whole thing out. So I don't have one. Why does that help my immune system? It probably, my theory is that I don't get sick because I have uh, killer T cells wandering through my body. Normally, they sit in your spleen as a reservoir, and then if you get sick, then they'll come out and attack whatever it is that needs to be attacked. But I don't have a reservoir, so mine are just wandering around all over the place. So before I get sick, my T cells are knocking out the killer T cells are knocking them out, knocking out the disease. That's my theory anyway. I don't know if it's true. I, there aren't enough of us spleenless people out there for them to figure out whether that's true or not. Otherwise, they take out people's spleens. I don't think that would be a very good idea. Theoretically, if your spleen is part of your immune system, and theoretically, if you don't have a spleen, you should be more susceptible to things. And it seems like I'm less susceptible, but I may be an anomaly anyway, since a lot of things, there's a lot of things strange about me. I'm not sensitive to nicotine. Nicotine. I'm not sensitive to caffeine. I'm not sensitive to opiates, as weird as that is. And ibuprofen makes me depressed. So, yeah, lots of weird things. Okay, what's happening here? Oh, there we go. Okay, we're talking about these things. Your hair thins, begins to turn gray, your hairline recedes. My hairline has receded, and I am going bald. It's about to, I think I'm about to meet front and back, and all I will have is hair on the sides. Your skin wrinkles up, and it and becomes looser, and my skin certainly has done that. Your thymus, which is right behind your heart, decreases the number of T cells. So theoretically, you're supposed to be more susceptible to diseases. I don't seem to be. I never get sick. I never catch colds. I never get the flu. But just no fun at all. Your lungs decrease in vital capacity mainly because you stop exercising as much as you did before. Now, the reality is that I can't run as far as I did when I was, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So it may be that the flexibility of my lungs is less. Your heart decreases in maximum heart rate. It increases in cholesterol and fat buildup in your arteries, and this is maybe have to do with the diets that people eat. Muscle mass decreases. I've been trying to maintain my muscle mass by lifting weights twice a week. We'll see how that goes. Do I look as buff as I did 10 or 12, 20 years ago? And the answer is, yeah, pretty close. I'm getting a bit of a gut, and I'm thinking maybe I need to do some exercises for my abdomen, but so far I've been too lazy to do it. I am starting to get a 3-pack on one side. Since I don't have a spleen, I have a scar across my thorax on the left side. That's where your spleen is. It's on your left side. It would be right here, would be your spleen. So I got this really nifty scar that runs along my rib cage. And they had to cut into my abdominal muscles, and because of that, I can only build up this one side. The other side kind of goes, what the hell's going on? Okay, so bone marrow decreases your B cells. So theoretically, your immune system decreases as well. Now, my theory is if I keep exercising and my diet's okay, then maybe I can maintain all of this stuff, except for the skin. Of course, there's not a lot I can do about that. My hair, there's nothing you can do for your hair, but we'll see how the rest of it goes. Like I said, I'm 73 years old. Most people will gain weight throughout their adulthood, though usually slowly. I weigh 190 pounds right now. My running weight when I was at college was 145. So I've gained 45 pounds, but I'm not exactly sure. There is some of it is fat. That definitely some of it is fat, but some of it is muscle because I wasn't lifting as much then as I am now. So that's kind of a question. Weight gain may be caused by multiple factors: a continuously declining in basal metabolic rate. This is something that you can maintain theoretically if you stay active. Uh, Genetics have a ton to do with it. I have a family that lives into their 90s, and for that reason, not but there's a trade-off. There's a trade-off to living into your 90s, and the trade-off is what do you look like when you're an adolescent and a young adult. I was a late bloomer. I think I told you that last week. I was a late bloomer. Most of all the individuals in my family, all my brothers and sisters were late bloomers. So genetically, it's a trade-off. You don't mature as early as other individuals do, but you get to live longer. It's a trade-off. Biology has a lot to do with it, and diet has a ton to do with it. What do you drink? What kind of food do you eat? Do you control your salt content? That kind of stuff. Adults with BMI over 25 is overweight. Over 30 is known as obese. And I'm right. I'm at 24, so there's a question as to whether I'm overweight. But then again, like I said, I'm a bodybuilder. Well, to some extent. So my muscles are pretty big, and that muscles take up a lot of weight, or they weigh a lot. So that's I go to the doctor from time to time. I have a heart doctor and I have a GP, and neither one of them complains about my weight. Not yet, anyway. The countries with the highest rates of obesity are the wealthiest countries. In developing countries, obesity rates are climbing. This may be because there has been an increase in Western type diet as the countries gain position in the world. And of course, the food has to be processed. One of the reasons why we don't have starvation as much as why we have as little starvation as we do around the world is because of processed foods. Now, processed foods are not always good ideas. Fresh uh, foods are better. Fresh meat, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits. But now, of course, we preserve everything. And it may be that preservatives allow us to have more food, but at the same time, it's not the best idea. Well, we can say it's not the best idea, but at least it's allowing fewer people to starve to death. Developed countries have higher obesity rates in lower socioeconomic groups because of the quality of the food that they eat. Obesity in developed countries is impacted by the diet and the sedentary work. And there you go. And I've got a sedentary job. My job is sitting here and talking to you, grading your postings, grading your papers, and that takes a lot of sitting in front of a computer and pretending that I'm working. Adult obesity rates, as you can see, the United States is the worst. Canada's not so hot. This is Argentina. This is Mexico. That is Greece. There we go. So you can see Australia is about the same as Canada. Colombia and Venezuela right here. Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And that's Lebanon, this little tiny thing, I think. No, that's Israel. Lebanon's up here. Anyway, okay, New Zealand. Obesity risks and outcomes: high blood pressure, diabetes, sleep disorders, digestive problems, teasing, ridicule, discrimination, difficulty finding a romantic partner, and of course, depression. Those are some of the problems with diabetes or with obesity. Lack of exercise may be caused by busy pace of modern life. Children get more exercise than adolescents, and the level of exercise just continues to decline over the years. And one of the problems we're having right now, of course, is video games. Video games are keeping the kids inside. And of course, if you ask them, they'll say they're bored unless they're playing video games. Um, it's boring to be outside. It's boring to go out to go for a walk. It's boring to do this. It's boring to do that. I hear this from my 10-year-old grandson. You know, and of course, in the old day, couch potatoes. This is a vision of a couch potato. This was what was going on in the early 2000s, in the late 1990s and 1980s. People, we got more television stations. When I was a kid, we only had three, four, maybe four if you had a local television station, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Uh, but now, of course, we have cable and satellite and DirecTV and Dish Network and whatnot. So you have choices of hundreds of channels, but kids are playing video games instead because, television's boring. Effects of exercise, especially aerobic exercise, you maintain a healthy weight. It increases your metabolic rate. It reduces risk of diseases and illnesses, and it lowers your levels of anxiety. This is aerobic exercise. What is aerobic exercise? That means you can breathe um, without any problems. So walking, swimming, biking, as long as you don't start gasping for air, that's aerobic exercise pretty much. And it's something that you need to do. Aerobic exercise is exercise that raises your heart rate but does not put you in oxygen debt. Running, swimming, aerobic dancing, soccer, well, I guess it all depends on how you play the game. And basketball. Oh, come on, basketball is not an aerobic exercise. I guess it can be if you're playing on half a court. When adults exercise regularly, they reduce the risks of a variety of illnesses and diseases, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, several types of cancers. Death rates decrease among those who get exercise as compared to those who don't get exercise. I had a friend. I had a friend that I met when we came back from Europe. We were stationed in Germany from '79 to '82, and I met this guy when we came back to the States. We were stationed at Offutt Air Force Base and right outside of Omaha, Nebraska. And I played soccer with him. That's where in '85 is when I lost my spleen. He wasn't playing that day because he was tired or hurt or something. He always had an excuse why he didn't have to run. Anyway, when I played soccer with him, the guy would stand in the middle of the field. He was really good with his feet, but he couldn't well, he could dribble, but he didn't want to run. And so you would pass him the ball in the center of the field, and then he would kick the ball way ahead of you, so you'd have to catch up with it. Of course, I was fast enough to do that, but you can never get him to make a run or whatever. Uh, Silly guy. He's dead now. He died because he had a heart attack. I had a heart attack once upon a time. Mine was actually worse than his, but I recovered. I just got a tiny spot on the back of my heart that is necrotic. It killed him. His heart attack wasn't nearly as severe as mine was. And he didn't survive it, and I did. And the reason I survived mine is because I'm so active, because I lift weights, and because I move. I'm not sedentary. And he died because he smoked and he hated to move. He pretended that he wasn't sedentary, but if you took a walk, if you tried to take a walk with him, he'd walk 3 or 4 steps and then he would stop and look at something, and he just was not a very active person, and he lied to himself about it all of his life until he died. There are also mental health benefits from exercise. Exercise generates endorphins and norepinephrine in the brain, which not only provide pain relief, but increase pleasurable feelings and feelings of well-being. And this is one of the reasons why I walk every day. I haven't walked today because we had that HLC stuff going on, but and I lift twice a week, and that's necessary. And when I say I lift until I'm sweating. If you don't sweat, you're not working. People who exercise regularly have lower rates of anxiety and depression, and maybe that's why I am so upbeat. Children who have high IQs are more likely to succeed as adults. IQ scores and future success are moderately correlated. Lowest scores had work-related problems. Highest scores did well in careers. Higher scores, 140 plus, and 140 plus is a genius level, had fewer personal problems and greater occupation success. And that may be because they understood what they were doing. But that's IQ scores. And I think we discussed IQ scores, didn't we? Yeah, we did discuss IQ scores. Anyway, you can look at it any way you like. Intelligence has been on the minds of educators since the beginning of the 20th century. In France, Binet and Simon came up with a test to measure intelligence in France in 1905 to free the French education system of individuals who were not intelligent enough to succeed. And that's actually one of these. This is Binet, and this is Simon, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I don't know where I found that picture. Binet brought the test to the United States in 1913, and it eventually was revised for the United States at Stanford University in California to become the Stanford-Binet IQ test. An attempt to gauge intelligence during World War I was an abysmal failure, and IQ has been struggling to find acceptance ever since. And I'll tell you what the problem was. They made everybody take the IQ test because they were trying to figure out where to put them. They were trying, would they be better off in the infantry? Would they be better off as officers or enlisted? Would they be better off in the artillery, where you had to do math all the time? Actually, at that time, machine guns were relatively new. They used machine guns they would fire them over hills, and they knew how much they dropped over a certain distance. So they would actually drop rounds into to trenches and whatnot by aiming them up and then having them come down. But they were able to calculate all of this. You know, bullets weren't the same as they are today. Anyway, so they gave these intelligence tests, the alpha test and the beta test. Now one of the problems they were having, I was talking about this with my wife and her cousin this morning. One of the reasons that they had problems was because public education wasn't universal in the South. Public education was universal in the North. It was you didn't have to go to school all the time if you lived in the South. You could opt out if you wanted to, and a lot of the kids, or a lot of the individuals, did opt out of education because they couldn't see any reason. They knew what they were going to do for the rest of their lives, and they didn't need to learn to read. So when they gave these tests to the soldiers, one of the problems they had was there were a lot of individuals that couldn't read. A lot of them were from the South. Most of them were from the South. And when they added up all the IQs that they determined, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a very good test. It really didn't measure intelligence as well as they wanted it to. But when they added it all up, they found out that the average man in the United States had an intellectual deficit. At the time, they referred to them as morons, which is just barely below the cutoff for intellectual deficit, what we used to call mentally retarded. as weird as that is. Of course, they didn't refer to them as mentally retarded back then. They referred to them as morons. There was moron, and then the next level is idiot, and I can't remember the other one. But yeah, those were words that they used to describe in psychology that they used to describe intellectual capacity back then. Steinberg's triarchic theory of intelligence includes the following three components: analytical intelligence, a traditional idea of intelligence; creative intelligence, taking information and applying it in new ways; and practical intelligence, applying information to solve problems in everyday life. Sternberg's practical intelligence may be more inclusive cross-culturally, having the ability and knowledge to adapt your abilities in a culturally appropriate manner. And of course, that is a form of intelligence as well. What we have learned, or what we have discerned over the last 40 or 50 years, is that intelligence doesn't just come in one format. And this is one of the problems that academia has. Academia just looks at whether you are going to be successful in academics. That's really all they care about because, well, the initial test by Simon and Binet in France was to determine if people could make it in the French educational system. So the IQ test is actually just based on is just based on academia. And whether you can be successful in academia. You can be a genius in a lot of different areas, and that's one of the things that Sternberg was trying to explain. And we're going to see that that's not the only type of intelligence that is accepted today. Cultures vary on what constitutes intelligence. In China, intelligence includes humility, self-knowledge, freedom from conventional standards of judgment. In Zambia, intelligence concepts emphasize cooperativeness and obedience. Intelligence in Kenyan adults includes responsible participation in family and social life. Now, I would be considered not real bright in Kenya because I live two states away from my family in Indiana. And I'm not very sociable. And one of the reasons is because I'm on the computer with my students all the time. I'm not sure how to define social life anyway. In Zimbabwe, the word for intelligence, Ngware, literally means prudent and cautious, especially in social situations. The adult brain becomes fully developed by the middle 20s. Two aspects of cognitive development in young adulthood: expertise and creativity. Expertise is the extensive knowledge and skill in a specific field. I have expertise in psychology. I also have expertise in political science, international relations, medical technology. I have degrees in all four of those areas. Exposure to a specific field allows problems to be addressed efficiently. Frontal lobe maturity promotes expertise. Creativity is putting new ideas together in a creative way. With expertise, the individual is able to go from problem solving to problem finding. Some rigidity can develop with age, causing creativity to peak in young adulthood. And of course, that is a question. But if you know about Picasso, if you look at any of the old art masters, you'll see that many of them became more creative as they got older. And writers are the same way. I'm thinking. Faulkner was that way. Hemingway was that way. He wrote some of his best novels as he got older. So did Faulkner. I don't know. Maybe. Intimacy versus isolation this is according to Erickson. Intimacy versus isolation is a central conflict starting in adolescence, drifting into adulthood. often this social crisis takes place at the same time as the identity development crisis. And of course, when I was in high school, and I think I told you this, maybe I didn't, but when I was in high school, most couples got married right out of high school. So there were a lot of 18 and 19-year-old weddings at that time. So the intimacy versus isolation was being identified or was being dealt with when the identity crisis was taking place. As in my time, and of course that's when Erik Erikson was writing in back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Okay, so possibly he was talking about my era, and it may not be true for your era. You know, this is we talk about Erickson like he's always going to be right, but the reality may be that that life may create a situation where Erickson is no longer correct, and we should stop teaching it. Erickson and other research, and of course, the reality is that it's up to you guys. You are the modern uh, students. If I keep teaching it, it's because hey, that really fits in my era. Has anybody changed over the last 73 years? And the answer is yeah, dude. What's wrong with you? Of course they've changed. And maybe Erickson isn't right anymore. Erickson and other researchers have observed that until the individual goes through identity development, they rarely get involved in a romantic relationship. And this it may or may not be true. I'm not really sure. My contemporaries, it was Erickson was right for my contemporaries, my cohorts, but it may be different, and culturally it may be different. However, Arseth has noted that often identity and intimacy develop at the same time, mutually reinforcing each other. And a lot of the complaints I see on television, at least on, we just watched a movie last night about commitment issues. Maybe that has to do with commitment, and there are a lot of guys out there that don't want to commit themselves to uh, a relationship because they haven't found themselves. Now, interestingly, I have a son uh, that I've been worried about for for all of his 50 years. Um, he got out of he graduated from high school, went to college, decided maybe that wasn't the best road for him to take. So after a couple of years in college, he packed up his pickup truck and moved to New York to become a model. And an actor. He wanted to be a model and an actor because he's really attractive. He takes after his mom. So it's my ex-wife. He actually looks like her dad. Anyway, yeah, so he wanted to be an actor or a model. Well, that didn't work out in New York, so he decided, well, maybe I would be better off in Los Angeles. So he moved all the way across country. Moved all the way. I was living in Mississippi at the time. And he stopped to see his family. Then he went out to Los Angeles and found a job. Finally, found a job out there, and tried to go to auditions and whatnot. And of course, he never made it in Hollywood. But he did become a pretty good bartender. He was a bartender. Why am I talking about this? Oh, the romantic relationship thing. Okay. So he's a pretty good looking kid, and so in that environment, he got hit on a lot, and he of course I raised him in Nebraska, so he didn't want to start a relationship with anybody that wasn't real. So these superficial things, he just didn't want to do it. So oh golly, the poor kid. And he decided that he needed to make it before before he should get serious about a relationship. Well, he never made it. He kept bartending and he kept going to auditions, and eventually he decided, I'm never. This isn't working for me. So when he turned in his late 20s, he decided that he would go to chef school. So we sent him through Cordon Bleu in Pasadena, and he graduated at the top of his class, and so he's looking for a job, and about that time he met a cocktail waitress that worked at his bar, and they became boyfriend girlfriend, and she had a lot of problems. Her biggest problem was she hadn't paid taxes in like 5 years. Anyway, so they decided that they would move. They moved in together, and then they moved across. They moved across the country. But before that, they got engaged. So he's been engaged for about 10 years now. They moved from Los Angeles to Cape Cod, and from Cape Cod to Denver, and from Denver to Florida, and from Florida to North Carolina, and now he's thrown all that other stuff out, and he has become he works for the government. He's a cryptologist, if you know what that is. Anyway, he works for the government. Why am I talking about? Oh, romantic relationships. But he's still not married. They still haven't gotten married. They've been living together for about 10 years now, and he won't get married. His reasoning for not getting married is because he's not exactly sure. He wants to be stable first. That's what he's a mathematician. This kid's a mathematician. Yes, he has a bachelor's degree and a math degree in applied mathematics. So he has to be stable before he can get married. Well, now he's making, I don't know, about $250,000 a year. So not for the government. He's actually working for a contractor right now. Anyway, okay, not important. But that's and he was born in 1972, so he's Gen X kid, and that was his idea, and that's still his idea. And I don't know if they'll ever get married. She's getting too old to have babies, so I'm thinking that that's probably off the table. Research shows that there are gender differences in development. Intimacy issues tend to arise in females before males. Intimacy often arises before identity for females. So it is different for males and females. But then again, society dictates how each gender will react to intimacy and to the intimacy versus identity conflict. Robert Sternberg proposed different types of love based on three specific qualities. This is Sternberg on your right. Passion was one of the qualities. Intimacy and commitment. Passion he defined as physical attraction and sexual desire. Intimacy is closeness and emotional attachment, and commitment is a pledge to love over the long run. The three can be combined to form 7 types of love, and that's what it looks like. That's all 7 of them. Okay, we're going to go through them right now. Liking, intimacy alone without passion or commitment. Most friendships fit this category. People are just friends. Friends. Infatuation, passion alone without intimacy or commitment. It involves a great deal of physiological and emotional arousal. It's a heightened level of sexual desire, no emotional closeness, no enduring commitment. And of course, that would be like a one-night stand or an affair. Would be infatuation. Empty love is commitment alone. There's no passion, no intimacy. A couple who have been married for many years and have lost the passion and intimacy to their relationship. In countries where there are arranged marriages, the early stages of marriage tend to be empty. Empty love. Romantic love, there is passion, there is intimacy, there is no commitment. We'll assume that's where my son and his fiance are. It is joyful, it is intense, it rarely lasts long. But in this case, of course, they've been together for about 10 years, maybe longer. I'm losing track of time. Companionate love, there is intimacy, there is commitment, but there is no passion. This type of love occurs with long-term couples. The passion has decreased, but they still feel intimate toward one another. They certainly are committed to one another because they've lived together for such a long time. Fatuous love, fatuous means foolish. There is passion, there is commitment, but there is no intimacy. Whirlwind courtships fit this criteria. People meet, fall passionately in love, and then get married before they have a chance to really know each other. That's what happened in the play Romeo and Juliet. Consummate love is there's passion, there's intimacy, and there is commitment. The ideal love for many people. Of course, this is a still from Princess Bride, the greatest love of all time, The Princess Bride. I've actually read the book, and the movie's better, I'll tell you, than the book. Usually the book's better than the movie. But I decided, hey, if the usually the book is more involved and you get deeper into things. But as far as The Princess Bride is concerned, the movie's better than the book. Changes in love over the course of a relationship, and of course, I don't know how many relationships you've been in. I've been married 3 times. So I've gone through all of these things over and over and over again, over and over and over again. Yes, 3 overs. Marriage may exist for several reasons. Uniting people to serve complementary gender roles, reduces sexual competition. It's necessary for the species. Variation between cultures in choice of marriage partners, economics, and number of marriage partners. Oh, then this isn't me. This isn't this number of marriage partners has to do with whether you have 2 wives or 2 husbands or 3 wives or 3 husbands. That's what that's referring to. Okay, what are we talking about? The importance of various traits in mate selection throughout the world. Mutual attraction, that's important for both men and women. Dependable character, that's important in both men and women. Emotional stability is important in both men and women. It's number 3. Pleasing disposition, important for both men and women. Good health is important as far as men are concerned, is number 5. And education and intelligence is the next important thing for women. Education and intelligence is number 6 for men. Number 6 is sociability as far as women are concerned. Yada 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 yada. Okay. Romantic love may not be a basis for marriage for all cultures. Arranged marriages are an alliance between families with love developing after marriage, commitment first, and attachment second. Many traditional cultures are shifting from arranged to semi-arranged marriages. Marriage includes economic transactions in many cultures. Bride price is a substantial gift of money or property from the groom and kin to bride and her kin. Bride service, groom is obligated to work for the bride's family for a time. And a dowry is a transfer of money or property from the bride's family to the groom. Luckily, my culture has never done any of this stuff. Western view of marriage strongly based on intimacy and sexual relationships. It focuses on ideal mate, could lead to marital dissatisfaction. In other words, this is what I want my spouse to be, but this is what my spouse actually is. You probably are wondering, why did you get married 3 times? And the answer is, the first 2 times I got married, I was trying to save people. I was thinking, hey, they're in a bad situation. She's growing up in a negative home. Maybe if I take her out of this situation, she'll she'll change, and she'll become a happier person. Well, that didn't happen. And the second one had to do with I was I didn't. I knew there was a problem, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was. Well, it turned out to be alcoholism, and I couldn't quite fight that one. I had two kids from my first marriage at that point, and I thought that wanting to be around the kids and wanting to be around me. I mean, I'm not the least pleasant person in the world, but it wasn't enough. The alcohol was a lot stronger pull on her than her desire to help me raise my children and to be with me. Sadly enough. Anyway, and I've been married to my current wife for, let me think, it will be 44 years in June. So there you go. Marital okay, factors that predict marital satisfaction: realistic expectations, shared interests, shared roles and responsibility, and shared power. And this is really kind of interesting. I'm a psychologist, and my wife is an MBA. So I don't have to worry about money because she takes care of the money. But I have no idea how much we have. So maybe I should worry about it a little bit more. Necessary to continually adjust, and that is the essence of marriage, is adjusting to new things, adjusting to situations. In Scandinavia, 15% of women and 5% of men are married by the age of 24. At the same time, in Hungary, 70% of the women and 33% of the men are married by the age of 24. The average age of brides in the United States is 25, and the average age of bridegrooms is 27. And this is a picture of a Hungarian wedding. Women are marrying men. Women who are younger are marrying older men. And that's the reason why these two numbers are so far apart. I'm not talking about old men like me. My God, no, they wouldn't do that. They would marry somebody in their late 20s or early 30s. 56% of the adult population in the United States are married and living with their spouses. Of people between 25 and 34, 34.7% have never been married. 34.7%. Among African Americans, 53.4% have never been married. There may be a myriad of reasons for this trend, including high unemployment among black men, a high level of independence among black women, penalties for having a non-contributing spouse in a household that is supported through any welfare payments. And that all depends on the state that you come from, of course. Every state has their own rules. For decades, researchers have been reporting that married individuals are happier than unmarried individuals. But that no longer seems to be the case. Marriage seems to increase women's stress because of unequal homemaking and child care responsibilities. In the beginning, the two seem to have different expectations about marriage. Women seek sharing of feelings and confidences. Men tend to express intimacy through sex, practical help, companionship, and doing things together. And if you are a young lady or you're a young man, this is one of the things that you need to memorize. Because if you're a male, then you will understand why Valentine's Day is so important, because it is a time when you can share your feelings. If you're a young lady, then don't get upset with a guy, because the reality is that he considers sex an expression of feelings, an expression of emotions, and so that's you got to underline this one right here as far as men are concerned. they're just looking for a companion to have sex with. I'm sorry, that's that's one way to look at it, and so the expectations are not diametrically opposed, certainly, but the understanding is completely different. And if you understand this, it's a little bit easier for you to resolve the behavior of your the young lady or young man in your life. According to research, married couples have sex more frequently than single people who are not cohabitating, excuse me. Most couples have more sex in the first year of marriage than they will in any other year during marriage. As people age, they tend to have sex less than they did when they were younger. Frequency of intercourse seems to be related to a couple's satisfaction with their marriage. The more satisfied they are, the more sex they have. 21% of married men, and 11.5% of married women report extramarital affairs. So men are bad, but women ain't so. It's not like they're innocent. Okay. Younger adults are more likely to feel that extramarital affairs are acceptable, though 75% of the people feel that it is always wrong. Marriage should provide emotional needs of love and intimacy, the soulmate marriage. When the soulmate marriage ends in divorce, the divorce is called an expressive divorce if the marriage doesn't provide self fulfillment. Belief in self fulfillment and seeking everything in marriage, the happily ever after scenario, leads to high divorce rates in the United States. Why? It's what's happening here. What's happening is that having these amazing expectations are unrealistic because things happen. There's always something going on. Shit happens. Everybody knows that. And with the happily ever after idea, nothing bad ever happens again because you're married and you're with your most beloved person in the world. But the reality is, stuff happens. Kids get in the way. And as far as the male is concerned, sex is really important. And if the kids get in the way, then whose fault is that? Well, it's both of their faults in reality. But well, anyway. Until the 1960s and 1970s, divorce laws in most states were very strict. With the liberalization of divorce laws, the number of divorces have increased markedly. And as I said, I've been divorced twice. I was divorced in 1974 and I was divorced again in 1970. Wait a minute, is that right? No, 1973 and 1975. The United States is one of the world's highest divorce rates, but divorce rates have plateaued since the 1980s. And of course, I got divorced twice in the 1970s. Almost 10% of the population in the United States are currently divorced. Divorces usually occur within the first 10 years of marriage, and of course, mine certainly did. Causes of divorce include age at marriage, younger than 25. Let's see. Yep, younger than 25 both times. Divorced parents. Nope, my parents stayed together, but her parents, my first wife's parents were divorced, and my second wife's parents weren't living together. Socioeconomic status, conflict and stress over finances. That was a problem. I was from a higher socioeconomic status than she was. Partnered behavior, drinking or drug use, and infidelity. Of course, my second wife, that was the biggest problem. And I didn't even know she drank. Or I knew that she imbibed from time to time, but I didn't know she was that heavy an alcoholic until after, of course, we were married. And then she tried to hide it by drinking, going out to the club. We were in the military at the time, and it was a surprise. Then she started drinking at home, and I didn't want the kids to see that because I've always considered excessive drinking a mistake. Anyway, adjustments after divorce hardest in the first 1 or 2 years, and I can attest for that. Not very easy. Several developments underlie the increase in divorce. Women who are more financially independent of their husbands may be less likely to stay in bad marriages. Fewer marriages are staying together for the sake of the children. The younger a person marries, the more likely the marriage will end in divorce. And I was married when I was 19, and my wife was 17. No, was she 17? Oh, she just turned 18. She had just turned 18. Teenage marriages have the highest divorce rate, and of course, 4 years later, we were divorced. About 4.5 years later, we were divorced. Education is also a factor. Women who drop out of high school or college are more likely to drop out of a marriage as well. And of course, my first wife finished high school but never went to college until after we were divorced. The following factors seem to predict a higher divorce rate: premarital cohabitation, young age at marriage, bearing a child before marriage, having no children, stepchildren in the home, divorce of an individual's own parents, being African American. 70% of all African American couples divorce compared to only 47% of white couples. So there are some statistics for you. Most women are worse off financially after divorce. Alimony is awarded in divorce cases in only 15% of the cases. Alimony is usually awarded for 2 to 5 years. Most states allow one spouse to obtain a divorce without the other spouse's consent. In my first wife's case, she had moved back home. She'd moved back to Indiana, and I was stationed in Lubbock, Texas, and so I was able to get a divorce without her consent. Usually, the woman is awarded custody of the children, and child support, when awarded, is often inadequate. In my case, of course, I had the children, and she moved back home with her mom. So we were 24 hours away. It took exactly 24 hours to drive from Lubbock, Texas, to my home in Indiana. So here you go. And we used to drive it straight through. I used to drive it straight through. It's not like the kids were driving it straight through. No, I used to drive it straight through. But of course, it's a 2-day trip. It's actually a 2-day trip from here. I live in Lost Nation, Iowa, to Saline. It's right at 21 hours, and I'm too old to be driving straight through anymore. I stop somewhere in Oklahoma, usually, or the Texas Panhandle. 40% of divorcing women have their incomes cut by as much as 50%, which is too much. Meanwhile, men's standard of living tends to rise because he is allocating a smaller portion of his income to support of his family. More than half the poor families in the United States are headed by single mothers. 80% of these women were once married. No matter how bad a marriage is, divorce is usually accompanied by feelings of failure, blame, hostility, and self-recrimination. This form of stress may result in poor health or even death. The social stigma to a divorce affects common social activities. Unlike the social support a widow tends to receive, a divorced woman doesn't get nearly as much social support. The individual who initiates the divorce may feel relief, sadness, guilt, apprehension, anger, which is better than the victim, who, in addition to the feelings that I've just described, feel rejected, loss of control, and powerlessness. And my first wife left me. So did my second wife. Wait a minute. Okay. Yeah, rejection is really strong. In my case, it was really strong. I had no idea with my first wife. She just didn't come home from work one night. I had supper already. I had put the kids to bed, and she just didn't show up. And so I'm worried about her, of course, and I'm waiting for the telephone to ring, telling me that she's been in an accident. And about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, she pulls up to the place to get her stuff. She didn't had no clue. I'm the dumbest guy in the whole county, I guess. The worst case scenario for either party is to still remain emotionally connected to the former spouse. Those who do not find a new lover or spouse will experience more emotional distress. For either sex, an active social life helps cut the emotional ties to the ex spouse. Women of any age are more affected by divorce than men, but especially older women. Divorce peaks in young adulthood. Of course, that's when I got my divorces. 75% of divorced women will remarry. Men are even more likely to remarry than women. A woman is more likely to remarry if her first marriage was brief, she was young when it ended, she has no children, she is non Hispanic white, she has a high school education, if she lives in the West. And that's where you guys are, in the West. Okay. Remarriages tend to be less stable than first marriages. And that's my poor first wife. I think she's been married 5, maybe 6 times. Anyway, why marriage works: sense of commitment, enjoyable relationship, intimacy balanced with autonomy, good communication, similar perceptions of the relationship, religious orientation, quick conflict resolution, showing anger is good, pouting shows an unwillingness to communicate. Compared to married young adults, it was thought being single led to increased mental health problems, physical health problems, and substance abuse. Through analysis, though thorough analysis has shown all these negative effects are overblown. In fact, the least happy people seem to be the people in an unhappy marriage, even compared to people who were separated, divorced, or widowed. So, being in an unhappy relationship. Now, in the 60s and 70s, when they first started allowing people to get divorced, one of the things that they noticed was, well, you couldn't get a divorce before. So there were a lot of people in unhappy marriages. So what happened in the 60s and 70s and 80s, all of these people who were just kind of sticking it out decided not to stick it out anymore. So the people in unhappy marriages were leaving in droves. But and of course it skewed these kinds of results. But now, of course, with everything equal, we know that people in unhappy marriages are the people that are the most unhappy of all the people that are separated, divorced, or widowed. The problem before was that the individual that was left was the one that felt the worst. So if the guy took off on the woman, then it was the person that was left with the children or whatever. So that was pretty ugly. Ethnic variations exist in singlehood. African Americans have higher rates of cohabitation than other groups. By age 40, 41% have never married. In Asian countries, which are more urban than the people in the United States, 1/3 of the women, 30 to 34, are single. In Japan, single young adults are the happiest group. 1/3 of Japanese women between 30 and 34, and 20% of women between 40 and 44 have never married. Now, the interesting thing about the 30 to 34-year-olds, with the people under 30, about 25% of them have never had sex, so they're virgins. Nearly all the unmarried adults in Japan continue to live at home, even into their 40s. And, this is, I hate to talk about sex, and probably I'll get fired for it. But the reality is, this is really, I think this is really important. The fact that we look at this and we think, well, that's not so bad. But when you say, well, they've never had sex and they're 30 years old, and it's 1/4 of the population, that's both males and females. Uh, Different culture, different way of looking at things. That's not the way. That's not the way we do things in the United States. There are similarities between homosexual and heterosexual partnerships. Both seek long-term relationship based on love, affection, and mutual respect. Both seek out similar partners. They have similar areas of conflict, money, sex, and household tasks. Differences include gay couples have open relationships and tolerant sexual episodes more than lesbian or heterosexual couples. Higher sexual activity among gay couples. Lesbian couples have the lowest frequency of sexual activity. Many differences are fading as acceptance increases. And of course, gay marriage is legal. They were afraid that when they repealed Roe versus Wade, that gay marriage uh, might go away, might disappear with a conservative court, but it hasn't happened yet. Uh, Gay marriage is now legal in the United States, in Belgium and Canada, the Netherlands, Spain, Britain, New Zealand, Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, France, Germany, and Denmark. So we ain't the only ones. It is also legal around the world, in some places around the world. Sexual peak occurs during young adulthood, social acceptance of their sexuality. There's implied pressure to have children, of course. Western countries report sexual activity is less about children and more for intimacy. Men report more sexually motivated behaviors than women do. They masturbate more frequently. They seek more stimulation, sexual stimulation, and they have more sexual thoughts. Masturbation rates for males is right around 100%. So, you know, they can say no, but they're probably forgetting what happened last week or whatever. In traditional countries, becoming a parent is extremely important. Fertility is a goal of a woman, and men enjoy greater status. Women unable to give birth are objects of pity and scorn in traditional countries. In developed countries, parenting is a choice and may not be extremely important. Parents are more likely to be on their own, although there are ethnic group differences. And as I told you, it looks like my son isn't going to have any children. Views on becoming a parent, advantages and disadvantages. The advantages: giving and receiving love and affection, greater meaning to life, becoming less selfish and learning to sacrifice, satisfaction of helping children learn and grow, greater acceptance as a responsible adult, less fear of death because children will carry on. The disadvantages: the loss of freedom, restrictions on choices. We My grandson is a picky eater, which is kind of irritating, mainly because there are places he doesn't want to go. He doesn't like fast food restaurants. He doesn't like McDonald's. He doesn't like Burger King or Taco Bell. So, rats. I used to go to McDonald's to eat their chicken nuggets, but he doesn't anymore for some reason. Not enough time for both family and work, less time with spouse or partner. He worries over children's health and safety, financial stress, fear that children will turn out badly or be unhappy. When my grandson is staying with us, I can't sleep. And the reason is because I'm worried that he'll get up during the night and fall down the stairs. I have no idea where that came from. He's never fallen down the stairs. But I just worry about him. I worry that something might happen, and it'll be my fault. In traditional cultures, gender roles are well defined, and parenting fits the roles. Um, Female roles include run the household, care for children, tend the crops, or make items that can be sold. Male roles include provide economically for his family. In developing countries, gender roles are less defined, but women are more likely to have household and child care duties. Across the Western world, about 90% of the single parents are single mothers. Single motherhood is higher now than 50 years ago. Rates of single parenthood in the United States runs at around 40%. In the United States, there are ethnic and educational differences. Rates among African Americans runs around 70% for single motherhood. Rates among white females runs around 40%. Single parent households in the United States, the highest percentage, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, New Mexico. There you go. And as you can see, every other country or every other state. Why Arizona is so much lower than New Mexico? It may have to do with the fact that there are so many old people living there. I almost said something else. And of course, this is where I live. And this is where I'm from. And I've lived here, and I've lived here, and I've lived here, and I've lived here, and there, and here, and here, and here, and here. Anyway, many single mothers cohabitate with a father. They may receive assistance from other family members. In some cases, gay and lesbian couples who adopt are considered single parents. True single mothers may have lower income and increased stress. The more support the single mother gets from her own parents and other relatives and friends, the less stress she suffers. And there we go. So the highest is, of course, African Americans, as we heard earlier. Whites. There's a reason why all the statistics fit the look closest to the white population. It's because 70% of all the people in the United States, and that's probably around 69%, are white. That's why. And African Americans, I think they're 12 or 13%. Latinos are at close to 20%, I thought. And then it's everybody else. Developing occupational goals can occur through 5 stages. This is according to Super in 1967. Crystallization, specification, implementation, stabilization, and consolidation. Crystallization is the initial stage, usually occurs during adolescence. It considers matching talents with interests, beyond fantasizing and begin to seek information. Now the idea of what you need to do for the rest of your life is starting to crystallize. The next is specification. Choices become more focused. They pursue the education and training to obtain their goal. I'm assuming that you are in specification at this point, since you are studying psychology or you're studying whatever you're studying, and this is one of the classes you have to take. Implementation, completing education that began in the previous stage. The individual must reconcile desires with the job market. Stabilization is the next step, is the next stage. Establishing a career, and then consolidation, gaining expertise and experience in your field. Choice of occupation is influenced by personality. John Holland describes 6 personality characteristics. Holland tries to match personality types with occupation. And here are the 6 types: realistic, intellectual, social, conventional, enterprising, and artistic. For realistic, high physical strength, practical approach to problem solving, and low social understanding. The jobs that fit with realistic, jobs that involve physical activity and practical application of knowledge, such as farming, truck driving, and construction. So if you have a realistic personality, then you would be really good at knocking things together. What did I just learn? Oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that interesting congresswoman from Georgia, ran a construction company before she became an internet sensation and was elected to Congress. Intellectual, high on conceptual and theoretical thinking, low on social skills, research in fields such as math and science. That is the intellectual area. The next category is social, high in verbal skills and social skills. The jobs working with people such as teaching, social work, and counseling. And of course, that's my category. Conventional, high on following directions, carefully dislike of unstructured activities. There's nothing more unstructured than my classes. Jobs involve clear responsibilities but require little leadership, such as bank teller or secretary. Enterprising category, high in verbal abilities, social skills, and leadership skills. They're good in sales, politics, management, running a business. And the last is artistic, introspective, imaginative, sensitive, unconventional, artistic occupations such as painting or writing fiction. Gender impacts occupational choices. Women are overrepresented in the service sector. Women's jobs tend to be low paying and low status. Women are underrepresented in STEM fields. Gender socialization in balancing work and family roles plays a part. Women are more likely to have work and take time away to care for family than men. Sociologists refer to women doing more work at home after working a full-time job as their second shift. Civic involvement goes up as young adults have children and become concerned. They may also be impacted by business networking. The individual may join a civic organization to enhance business contacts. Television plays a role in leisure activities in young adulthood. There is a negative correlation between television watching and community involvement. Since television viewing is not demanding, it is attractive to engage in. And that is the end of the chapter. So it's kind of a fun chapter. We'll talk to you again next week.